Azerbaijan just openly defied Russia, right on its own border, and Moscow barely responded. Days ago, Volodymyr Zelensky stood beside Ilham Aliyev in northern Azerbaijan, just 15 miles from Russian territory. They signed defense deals, expanded military cooperation, and then Zelensky proposed peace talks with Russia in Baku. Not Moscow, not Geneva, Baku. A few years ago, that would have been impossible. And Moscow's response? Almost nothing. No outrage, no real counter-narrative, just silence, deflection, and a few scattered threats. And that silence speaks bounds about how much power Moscow has lost in the region. I'm Bruce Pannier. I spent 4 decades covering the former Soviet Union. This is Turan Research Center, hosted by the Yorktown Institute, where we break down the geopolitics of Turkey, Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. If you're new here and want more analysis like this, please like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's get into it. Zelensky's choice of venues was deliberate. Gabala isn't Baku, it's in northern Azerbaijan, about 15 miles from the Russian border. Aliyev confirmed at the joint press conference that the two countries' defense industries had been discussing joint production behind closed doors.
Hərbi texniki əməkdaşlıqla bağlı fikir mübadiləsi aparıldı və burada da çox böyük perspektivlər var.
Zelensky publicly disclosed that Ukrainian air defense specialists were already in Azerbaijan.
Я сьогодні говорив з нашими експертами, які перебувають сьогодні в Азербайджані. Вони безумовно підтримують наших колег. Безумовно, ми будемо розвивати наше співробітництво, co-production.
Aliyev reaffirmed support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, recalled his own visit to Kiev days before Russia's full-scale invasion.
Bir sözlə, bir çox istiqamətlər üzrə bugün biz uğurla əməkdaşlıq edirik. Bu əməkdaşlıq bugün bir daha təsdiqləndi.
Cumulative Azerbaijani humanitarian aid to Ukraine had by then exceeded $45 million. Then came the diplomatic offer that inverted the usual Russian script. Zelensky proposed Baku as the venue for trilateral talks among Ukraine, the United States, and Russia.
Безумовно, ми готові до найближчих перемовин в Азербайджані, якщо Росія буде готова до дипломатії.
Not Moscow, not Minsk, not Geneva, Baku. The proposal was conditional, if Russia is prepared for diplomacy, but the geography was the point. Zelensky was naming a capital that for 2 centuries Russia considered part of its own zone of dominance and asking Moscow to come to him there. Aliyev signed off on the offer. That would have been politically impossible 10 years ago. To understand why it's possible now, we have to walk back through how Azerbaijan got here. Azerbaijan's geography is its inheritance. It sits wedged between Russia to the north and Iran to the south, 2 empires that have spent centuries treating the South Caucasus as a space to be carved up. But here's the part that often gets forgotten. For roughly 400 years, it was Azerbaijani dynasties that ruled Persia. The Safavid dynasty, which founded modern Iran in 1501, was Turkic Azerbaijani in origin. Its founder, Shah Ismail, spoke Azerbaijani Turkic and wrote poetry in it. The Qajar dynasty that followed in 1789 was also Turkic Azerbaijani from the early 1500s until the early 1900s. From the early 1500s until the early 1900s, the language of the Persian court and military elite was in significant part Azerbaijani. That changed in the early 19th century, and it changed in part because of Russia. In 2 short wars, the Russian Empire forced Qajar Persia to cede its northern territories. The Treaty of Gulistan in 1813 and the Treaty of Turkmenchai in 1828 split Azerbaijani world in 2. The southern half stayed in Iran, where it remains today. The northern half, modern Azerbaijan, was absorbed into the Russian Empire and later into the Soviet Union. The final act of Russian rule made the rupture personal. On January 19th and 20th, 1990, 26,000 Soviet troops stormed Baku to crush an independence movement Moscow had lost the ability to control through politics.
Black January was one of the most brutal Soviet crackdowns towards the end of the Soviet Union. So you have three major ones in Almaty, in Vilnius, in Tbilisi, and then in Baku as well. In essence, they invaded Baku as if it was an enemy city. They sent in a huge amount of Soviet troops to pretty much implement a curfew without telling the population beforehand what the rules of that curfew were. They shot into crowds almost indiscriminately, leading to the deaths of many civilians, and they cut off broadcasting as well, so the population had no idea what was going on.
Official Azerbaijani figures put the death toll at 147 civilians. Other accounts are higher. Tanks fired on ambulances. Soldiers shot into apartment windows. Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov later acknowledged the operation's real purpose was to prevent a non-communist victory in upcoming elections. Gorbachev would eventually call it the biggest political mistake of his career. Azerbaijanis call it Kara Yanvar, Black January. It's the country's national day of mourning, and it's the reason hostility to Russian dominance in Azerbaijan was never just an elite calculation. It was a popular memory, scored into the founding of the modern state.
Black January was an event that led to the understanding that this is what happens if we are under Russia's thumb. This is what happens if we're dependent on Russia. And for that reason, it is crucial to be as independent as possible, especially from the large empires that surround the country.
So when Azerbaijan declared independence in 1991, less than 2 years after Black January, it wasn't reclaiming sovereignty in the abstract. It was reversing nearly 2 centuries of Russian and Soviet rule with the wounds of that final crackdown still open. From the start, Baku's elite understood something that other post-Soviet capitals took longer to learn. Russia would not accept the reversal as final. For most of the post-independence period, Azerbaijan distrusted Moscow but couldn't afford to defy it. The reason was Karabakh. The conflict over the Armenian-claimed enclave gave Russia a permanent pressure point. Moscow officially backed Armenia, which became a treaty ally and a CSTO member. But Russia also sold weapons to Azerbaijan and chaired the OSCE Minsk group that formally mediated the conflict. It positioned itself as the one external actor whose decisions either side had to consider. This is the same playbook Russia ran elsewhere. In Georgia, Moscow uses Abkhazia and South Ossetia. In Moldova, Transnistria. For years it was the same with the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics in Ukraine. Keep a frozen conflict frozen, and you keep both sides on a leash.
Our commitment to help Armenia and Azerbaijan.
For Azerbaijan, the leash was real. In 2009, Azerbaijani media reported that Russia had transferred roughly $800 million in weapons to Armenia. Moscow officially denied it. Then, leaked U.S. diplomatic cables surfaced showing that Russia's defense minister had admitted the transfer to his Azerbaijani counterpart. In his own words, after the second bottle of vodka. Baku could summon ambassadors and run angry op-eds. It couldn't do much else.
Since Karabakh was occupied by Armenian separatists, Azerbaijan's top foreign policy goal has been to reclaim it. Now, they understood that Russia's role here was going to be to try to keep the conflict frozen for as long as possible. They did not want to see a solution because a solution would mean that they would lose their leverage over both Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's why Azerbaijan bided its time, built up its military, forged pretty crucial alliances with Turkey and Israel that helped also modernize its military, and waited for a moment when they waited for a moment when they knew that Russia would not be able to intervene.
That world ended in stages. The first stage was the 2020 Second Karabakh War, in which Azerbaijan, with Turkish backing, retook most of the territories Armenian forces had held since the 1990s. Russia brokered a ceasefire and deployed peacekeepers, but the underlying balance had shifted.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
The second stage was Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Moscow's resources, attention, and prestige all bled toward the Western Front. The military bandwidth Russia had used for decades to project influence into the Caucasus and Central Asia, peacekeeping deployments, joint exercises, security guarantees, was now consumed by a war it couldn't win quickly.
Своим вторжением в Украину Россия фундаментально подорвала свои перспективы к будущему. Вместо того, чтобы инвестировать в развитие, они инвестируют в убийство людей и тем самым обрекают свою страну на загнивание. Да, это не будет быстро, да, это не произойдет завтра, но это произойдет точно, потому что те ресурсы, они невосполнимы. Ни людские, ни материальные, они невосполнимы. Это все отбрасывает Россию на десятки лет назад. Нас тоже, между прочим, Украину, потому что Украину уничтожают. Но если все будет так, как мы хотим, с европейскими странами вместе, мы имеем шанс. А у России с Китаем такого шанса нет. Китай не будет инвестировать в Россию никаких денег. Китай будет всегда знать, что чем слабее Россия, тем проще им выкручивать руки и добиваться снижения цен на сырье, что только их и интересует.
A leaked internal Russian assessment from earlier this year acknowledged what was already visible from the outside. The war in Ukraine had significantly hampered Russian influence across the entire post-Soviet space. The effects rippled outward. Armenia began openly questioning the value of Russian security guarantees and accelerating its own pivot toward the West.
Мы до сих пор не в состоянии объяснять нашему народу, нашим гражданам, почему ОДКБ не среагировала вопреки тем обязательствам, которые есть согласно договору об организации о коллективной безопасности.
Kazakhstan deepened its multi-vector diversification, courting China, Turkey, and Brussels. Central Asian capitals actively strengthened ties with countries that had previously been on the margins of their foreign policies. The whole architecture of post-Soviet deference started to flex, and Azerbaijan was the country best positioned to take advantage of the slack.
What does this mean for the region? We're seeing Azerbaijan very often at the forefront of these initiatives to unite the region, such as the Organization of Turkic States. And the goal here is to really achieve maximum independence, which is something that all of these post-Soviet countries really want. No one wants to be in Russia, or anyone for that matter, just to be in their orbit. Everyone wants to be independent.
The third stage was September 2023. Azerbaijan moved decisively to restore full control over Karabakh. Russia's peacekeepers, whose presence in places like Transnistria and South Ossetia is meant to be permanent, withdrew ahead of schedule. They stood aside. That's when Russia's lever broke. Without Karabakh, Moscow had no trump card left to play over Baku.
Salam asker!
The Karabakh lever didn't break by accident. It broke because Azerbaijan had spent 30 years methodically building alternatives. Militarily, Baku diversified to Turkey and Israel. Turkish drones, Israeli loitering munitions and electronic warfare systems, and joint training programs gave Azerbaijan a force structure that no longer depended on Russian platforms or Russian goodwill. The 2020 campaign was proof of this concept.
Azerbaycan xalqına can sağlığı, yeni uğurlar arzulayıram. Karabakh Azerbaycan'dır.
Economically, Azerbaijan's top trade partners by total volume are now Italy, Turkey, Israel, India, and Greece. Russia is significant, about 20% of Azerbaijani imports, but no longer dominant. And critically, the relationship has become asymmetric in Baku's favor. Azerbaijan is the keystone of the north-south transport corridor that Russia uses to ship goods to Iran and the Gulf. This is the context for what's been happening over the past year. Russia and Azerbaijan have been in an open rift since December 2024. It started with the Azal Embraer crash. An Azerbaijani passenger jet flying from Baku to Grozny was forced down in Kazakhstan after Russian air defenses fired on it. 38 civilians died. Baku demanded a public Russian apology, admitting guilt and compensation.
Rusiya tərəfi
Azərbaycandan üzr istəməlidir. İkinci, öz günahını etiraf etməlidir və Azərbaycan dövlətinə və zərər çəkən sərnişin və ekipaj üzvlərinə təzminat ödəməlidir. Bu bizim şərtlərimizdir.
Moscow refused. Azerbaijan escalated methodically. It closed the local branch of Russia's Cultural Diplomacy Agency, long suspected of housing intelligence officers. It shut down RT and Sputnik's Baku offices. It declared a senior Russian Duma deputy persona non grata after he called for crackdowns on the Azerbaijani diaspora. Then, in June 2025, Russian police raided ethnic Azerbaijani communities in Yekaterinburg. 2 people were killed in custody with serious allegations of torture. Azerbaijan responded by arresting 2 Sputnik journalists in Baku for alleged ties to Russian intelligence and canceling all cultural cooperation with Russian state organizations. Aliyev called Zelensky to reaffirm support for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Aliyev had also publicly skipped Russia's Victory Day parade, the most symbolically loaded event of the Kremlin calendar, canceling it at the last minute. Russian state media tried to save face by claiming he was attending a memorial for his father. Azerbaijani state media said openly what everyone knew. He wasn't going because of the rift. Then, in October 2025, Moscow blinked. Putin met Aliyev and for the first time acknowledged that a Russian missile was responsible for the Azal crash.
И 2 ракеты, которые были выпущены, они не поразили напрямую самолет. Если бы это произошло, он рухнул бы на месте.
6 months later, on April 15, 2026, just 10 days before Zelensky landed in Gabala, Russia and Azerbaijan jointly announced a compensation settlement. The statement formally acknowledged what Baku had demanded for 16 months, that the disaster resulted from an unintentional strike by an air defense system in Russian airspace. The Kremlin tried to frame it as turning the page. The sequence tells a different story. Azerbaijan held its ground for 16 months, refused every face-saving Russian formula, kept the public pressure on, and waited Moscow out. Russia was the one that capitulated.
Частично урегулирован вопрос со сбитым азербайджанским лайнером над Грозным, когда Россия частично выполнила, но основные пункты выполнила азербайджанских требований, и в Москве решили, что теперь Алиев и Азербайджан, руководство Азербайджана будет придерживаться их линии в отношении, в частности, Украины. Однако, как мы видим, произошло прямо противоположное. Алиев в очередной раз продемонстрировал, что он самостоятельный игрок, и Азербайджан сам определяет, с кем, по каким направлениям сотрудничать.
Which brings us back to Gabala and to what the Russian media response told us. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, asked directly about the trilateral talks proposal, refused to engage. He fell back on his standard formula about Ukraine needing to summon the will for diplomacy. He said nothing about Azerbaijan's suitability as a venue or about Aliyev's decision to host Zelensky in the first place. That silence was deliberate. Vladimir Solovyov's nightly broadcast, one of the Kremlin's loudest megaphones, gave the Gabala summit no significant analytical segment. Dmitry Kiselyov's Sunday flagship, Vesti Nedeli, treated it as secondary material. These are programs that have spent years constructing elaborate narratives about Western encirclement and Ukrainian desperation. They couldn't generate one for Gabala because the facts didn't fit.
Russia is a neighbor of the South Caucasus, and you have problems with every single country of the South Caucasus. That simply would undermine Moscow's position in the region. So Moscow tries to balance, tries to find a better way, more pragmatic way to settle tensions, at that moment, at this exact moment. So, and that I think explains that it's not really interested at this particular time to ratchet up, tensions with Azerbaijan because of Zelensky's visit. Especially given the fact that the visit didn't really produce something anti-Russian in terms of, sort of rhetoric and so on and so on. So that also explains that Baku is very careful not to frame the visit as something, something anti-Russian.
The Telegram nationalists filled the vacuum with what they always fill vacuums with: ethnic invective. The channel Two Majors, with over 1 million subscribers, called Aliyev a traitor of perishable food and threatened the Azerbaijani diaspora in Moscow. A Duma deputy warned that if Ukrainian and Azerbaijani jointly produced weapons reached Russian territory, Azerbaijan would automatically become an unfriendly state. That threat is the entire problem in miniature. The Russian political class still has the vocabulary it developed in an era when post-Soviet states had nowhere else to go. The vocabulary works only as long as the threats land. They no longer land. And here's the asymmetry that captures the moment. Moscow reportedly pressured both Astana and Baku to prevent Zelensky's tour. Kazakhstan canceled. Azerbaijan went ahead. One capital still calculates Moscow's reaction as a binding constraint. The other doesn't.
За любые контакты с Украиной, страны Южного Кавказа и Центральной Азии, я не говорю про Беларусь, получают довольно жесткий прессинг со стороны официальной Москвы. Им угрожают, и персонально угрожают использовать те рычаги влияния и давления, которые имеются в Москву на эти страны. Это, безусловно, знак того, что и вся территория Азербайджана – это азербайджанская территория, никто не будет определять, что и как делать руководству страны.
The Gabala visit isn't happening in isolation. It's happening at exactly the moment Russia is fighting hardest to recover ground in another part of the South Caucasus, Armenia. In January 2025, the philosopher Alexander Dugin, often called Putin's brain, declared on a Russian YouTube channel.
Нельзя согласиться с существованием суверенной Армении, или суверенной Грузии, или суверенного Азербайджана, суверенного Казахстана, суверенного Узбекистана, Таджикистана, Киргизстана. Ничего суверенного в этой новой модели существовать не может. И либо они будут в нашем лагере, частью нашего единого союза, либо они станут плацдармом Запада, или Евросоюза, или Америки, или при каких-то обстоятельствах Китая.
2 days earlier, Vladimir Solovyov had suggested Russia could launch a special military operation against post-Soviet states, using the same euphemism that preceded the invasion of Ukraine. This is the strategic vocabulary of the people closest to the Kremlin's worldview. Moscow has not reconciled itself to losing the post-Soviet space, and it will continue to push back wherever it sees an opening. Armenia is the current opening. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's government faces parliamentary elections on June 7, 2026. Pashinyan has framed the vote as a choice between peace and war. The opposition, backed by a Russian-Armenian billionaire and former President Robert Kocharyan, wants to reopen the Karabakh question and slow the US-brokered normalization with Azerbaijan and Turkey.
Որովհետև հենց այդ ամսից սկսվեց 44 օրյա ծանր պատերազմը։ Սեպտեմբերին սկսվեց Հայաստանի տարածքային ամբողջականության դեմ հարձակումը։ Սեպտեմբերին սկսվեց Արցախի բռնի հայաթափումը եւ էթնիկ զտումը։
Russia is running an open campaign to support them. Putin met Pashinyan in the Kremlin on April 1st and warned, with a hint of menace,
У нас в Армении очень много друзей, очень много, мы это знаем.
Russian state media personalities have called for Pashinyan's removal. Moscow is reportedly preparing sanctions against Armenian officials. 2 pictures, side by side. As we reported in an earlier video, in Armenia, Russia is mobilizing every instrument of influence it still has: oligarchic financing, church networks, information operations, sanctions threats to keep one country in its orbit ahead of one election. In Azerbaijan, that influence is already gone. The country Moscow once leveraged through Armenian conflict is now hosting the Ukrainian president, signing defense deals, and offering itself as a venue for the negotiations Russia keeps refusing. Step back, and what you see at Gabala is not really a bilateral summit. It's a snapshot of a regional order being redrawn.
В Баку это прекрасно понимают, но это прямая угроза для Азербайджана. Это попытка России вернуться на Южный Кавказ, чтобы иметь рычаг влияния и на Баку, и на Ереван. И, кстати, именно эти попытки России подорвать, это же прямая антиазербайджанская политика России. вернуть карабахский вопрос, вернуть вопрос армян Карабаха, привести к власти реакционные силы в Армении. Это все заявка на новую войну на Южном Кавказе. И это один из факторов, который, опять же, подтолкнул Баку к военно-техническому сотрудничеству с Украиной.
The U.S. brokered Armenian and Azerbaijani peace framework, initiated at the White House last year, dissolved the OSCE Minsk group as a precondition. That ended Russia's formal mediation role in the process Moscow had treated as its exclusive domain since the 1990s. The Trump route for international peace and prosperity, the connectivity corridor through Armenia's Syunik province, is explicitly designed to route trade between Turkey and Central Asia without passing through Russia and Iran.
Azerbaijan's independence has led other countries in the region, especially in Central Asia, to look at it as a leader and as a country that can essentially bring them towards a similar degree of independence, at least as much as possible. And part of this is because of Azerbaijan's geography. This is also the bridge to Central Asia, because exports through Azerbaijan, through the Caspian Sea, and then either through Georgia or potentially now through through Armenia, give Central Asia an option that does not rely on Russia, China, or Iran.
Rand and Chatham House have both noted that Russia's most plausible role in current South Caucasus diplomacy is as a spoiler, a striking demotion from the position it held in 2020.
Слабая Россия – это удобный объект для хороших заработков. Да, и Казахстан, и Узбекистан будут вкладываться в срединный коридор, так называемый, который проходит через Южный Кавказ, и особенно на фоне того, что добрые украинские дроны и ракеты скоро сделают невозможным экспорт российской нефти из черноморских, а потом, возможно, и балтийских портов. И потому потребность в альтернативных маршрутах довольно высока. Но это все время, это большие инвестиции, это не так просто сделать. И на сегодняшний момент, да, будет развиваться транспортная инфраструктура Каспийского моря, безусловно. Но это только самое начало процесса.
Azerbaijan is no longer a country Moscow manages. It's an autonomous diplomatic actor with its own foreign policy, its own defense partnerships, and its own willingness to host the leaders of Russia once isolated. The deeper realignment underway runs through Baku. The question this raises is bigger than the South Caucasus. It's whether the post-Soviet order, the assumption that Moscow gets a say over its neighbors' choices simply because they were once Soviet republics, can survive when the neighbors have alternatives, partners, and confidence. Azerbaijan is a test case, where the answer is already clear. Armenia is the test case still being decided. Kazakhstan, Moldova, Georgia, they're watching both. The Russian media silence at Gabala was the diagnostic. When the system that's fluent in narrative construction can't construct a narrative, it's because the event doesn't fit the architecture of the empire that's been built to defend. Thanks for watching. This video is based on an analysis by Joseph Epstein for the Turan Research Center. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read the full piece. If you found this video informative, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And let me know in the comments, do you think Russia has any leverage left in the South Caucasus, or has Azerbaijan's defiance already settled the matter?